Hello. Hi. I am going to read something kind of silly, so that was very profound, and that's not what I'm doing. So it's called, I'm just going to read half of it because it's too long to read the whole thing, but Cat Secret Weapon Number 1. Do you ever wonder what happens to the cat when the villain dies? Probably not. Humans are usually so busy rooting for the good guy, they forget about the little ball of fuzz the villain pets while revealing the nefarious plan. Well, once our villain expires, we get shipped back to the pound. I've been in and out so many times I've lost track. How is it possible the only people who adopt me are evil, you ask? Well, first, you'd be quite surprised at the percentage of population that's devised plans to take over the world. But second, there's an animal shelter right across the street from the headquarters of the Organization of Evil Villains. Yes, the redundancy is annoying, but no one ever listens to the quadruped. OEV is the association for villains. In fact, to put a diabolical plan into action, you have to be sanctioned by OEV. If not, the retrieval team comes to retrieve you. You do not want to be retrieved by OEV. There are typically two kinds of evildoers who come into the shelter: your seasoned villain with years of diabolical scheming under his belt, and the plucky upstart trying to prove himself to the world. As they bring me out this morning to the adoption area, it only takes a moment to deduce I am staring at the second. A young black teen stands awkwardly, tall and gangly in the way that teenage humans have of having way too many limbs with many more joints than anatomically possible. He paces a small space back and forth in high-top sneakers. Every few minutes, he pats his high-top fade that stands like an impressive hair monument 8 inches off his head. Usually, this kind doesn't gravitate towards me. As I said, I'm not your average villain's cat, and they usually know they can't handle the massive malevolence I bring to the table. These upstarts prefer to go with a younger, short hair for their first regulation cat. I, in contrast, am infinitely more distinguished, with a luscious coat of jet black fur. Technically, they created a new category for me over long hair. I have piercing yellow eyes, which can issue the second longest stare in cat history. The scientists, when not planning world domination, created a Guinness Book of Evil World Records. And I have certifiably the loudest hiss of any cat alive. What I'm saying is, the very look of me convinces most of these newbies they couldn't handle me. If one does get delusions of grandeur, I usually just have to issue a low growl and start that second longest stare, and they remember their place. This newbie, though, is completely clueless. My growl and stare produce no quantifiable results. I escalate to fully extended claw swipes, and finally I break out Cat Secret Weapon Number 2, that record-setting hiss. This kid just throws back his head, crowned by that 8-inch curly leaning tower of Pisa as he laughs. Yeah, now I know for sure that's the one I want. Today is definitely not going as planned. Most of the time when I'm chosen, my villain is ready for me, so I ride home in a gold-flecked carrier with caviar and bottled spring water until I get to his lair and can retire to my cat house, usually multi-level, with a modest 2 or 3 diamond-encrusted food bowls throughout. Can you imagine, then, the humiliation of being grabbed unceremoniously, thrown into a surplus cardboard box, for God's sakes, shoved into the backseat of a faded brown 98 Honda Civic, which I later learned was his mother's, and then how horrifying it was to arrive at his room in said mother's basement, to be shown a pile of old and clearly unclean t-shirts as he said, "Make yourself at home." He then plops down as what I assumed was a desk underneath the mountains of gears, soldering tools, and miscellaneous choking hazards, and promptly ignores me. Well, what would you do? The same thing I am, I'm sure. Pee all over the t-shirt pile while staring right at the kid. Cat Secret Weapon Number 3. While it most likely won't be enough on its own to get me a return to the shelter, I'm sure it will result in screaming at the very least if my past experience with villains is any indication. This shall be the first link in the chain of destruction I forge around this impertinent boy. He's not even noticing. How is that possible? I stare at him for 5 minutes straight. He never even lifts his head. As I turn my attention to the bed, contemplating if I have a second liquid assault in me, the door bursts open. A whirlwind in the shape of a young black girl with massive afro puffs enters the room. She wears a black leotard with a gold tutu that battles with her afro puffs for circumference supremacy. She has paired the outfit with scuffed combat boots and an oversized ragged leather jacket. "Are you ready to do this demand video now, Khalil?" she asks. "Stop touching that. And you know we're not making the video until I complete the first phase of construction." The girl stomps a foot. "I know that. I just thought we could do a practice video so we could review it and make sure everything is perfect for the real one. I even got dressed up for it." Yeah, about that, what exactly are you wearing, Minnie?" he asks. She looks down at her outfit proudly. "This is my evil scientist demands video outfit, duh. You have to wear something that's like super scary, but still shows you have style." She twirls to emphasize the latter part. As she comes out of the spin in a surprisingly good plie, one of my former villains loved the ballet so much he kidnapped a national troupe to force them to perform for him, so I've seen my fair share of quality plies. Her eyes fall on me. "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, you got the cat!" The bouncing and hand clapping look both more ridiculous and more adorable given her current attire. That's not me being sentimental in any way, just an impartial observation. "When did you get it? What is its name? Is it a boy or a girl? Can it sleep in my room? Can I pick it up?" The barrage of questions distracts me from the fact that the last is actually rhetorical as she swoops me into her arms. Typically, I have all sorts of defenses against this. See, record-winning hiss. But she moves so quickly, like a cat. The handful who previously had been so brave or so foolish as attempt to pick me up carry both literal and figurative scars to remind them of their folly. But none had the evil genius of this oddly dressed girl, who used her nefarious spidey senses to suss out my only vulnerabilities, my Achilles paw, if you will. Part of being a villain's cat is being impervious to normal petting, but every stone has a crack. She scoops me up, her hand sliding to scratch just inside my upper left leg, the paw pit, as we cats call it, while simultaneously rubbing behind my right ear in counterclockwise motions. How could she possibly have known? My entire body goes limp as I lean against her chest, powerless. Khalil answers her previous barrage of questions sequentially. "I picked the cat up this morning since I had to go to OEV headquarters to get my ID picture taken. The cat does not have a name yet. I honestly did not ask about the gender. I mean, does it really matter? It's a cat. And again, it's a cat. It'll sleep where it wants. And clearly, you've answered your last question yourself, Minnie." He nods to me in her arms. "Yeah, I guess you're right about the gender," she muses. "Cats always seem above that sort of thing anyway. But it does need a name, like now. Oh, and speaking of names," her attention zeroes in on Khalil. "Stop calling me Minnie. That's a baby's name. I haven't used that name in like forever." Khalil rolls his eyes. "Right, how could I forget? Sorry, Amina, oh grown one." But Amina seemed to have her sarcasm force field set to maximum because she just nods like a benevolent monarch. She turns her attention to me, nary a break in the dual petting. "Now, what should we call you?" she wonders. She has contemplated for a few minutes. Then her eyes brighten and she shouts, "Wuzzy McCuddlekins!" She must be having a stroke. She's shouting gibberish. Her brother should call the paramedics. Any second now her limbs will seize up and she'll drop me and I can make my escape. But Khalil's high top bows solemnly as he nods. "You know, I never would have thought of that, but it does seem to fit the cat perfectly." I cannot believe my ears, and as you know, cats have excellent hearing. I have been part of, nay, integral to dozens of plots to destabilize, control, and or destroy the majority of the globe, and the name they want to give me sounds like a knockoff Care Bears line? That settles it. Amina rubs her chin on the top of my head. "Welcome home, Wuzzy." Typically, I would flatten my ears in anger, but that would interrupt Amina's scratching of the right one. So I content myself with a terrifying and harrowing eye narrowing. It occurs to me that I've belonged to so many villains, but I've never actually been given a name before, atrocious as this one is. Once the transmission demands were done, I was typically plopped unceremoniously onto the ground, left to my own devices, ignored until the next worldwide appearance. Something unfamiliar flutters inside of me. It's obviously just a reaction to the generic cat food brand at this shelter. Amina leans over Khalil's shoulder. "So when is it going to be done?" Khalil sighs and pushes back from the desk. Well, as you know, the prototype is complete and fully operational. Like the Death Star, Amina giggles. Khalil smiles, clearly proud of his little sister's nerd reference. Yeah, just like the Death Star. But now I'm waiting to hear back from OEV about financial support to complete the full-scale version. It determined like 18 forms in triplicate. And the real one is going to be big enough to affect the whole world, Amina asks. Yeah, but not the whole world at once. Since it'll be in orbit and accessing a network of satellites the OEV has hacked into, it'll only affect the parts of the planet within range. But I'll program it with the Earth's rotation so that it'll eventually get everyone. I decided to start with this hemisphere, though, just in case it gets deactivated by some hero before it's completed around. I figure the US is the country that needs it most right now. I look back and forth between them, my curiosity almost unbearable. What is this new weapon that has the potential to affect the entire Earth? What are their ultimate fiendish plans? I have to know. And don't do the curiosity and the cat thing. Just don't. Amina says, as if reading my mind, oh, but Wazzy doesn't know what we're talking about. We should show him the prototype and how it works. Prototype, Khalil corrects. And I'm not even sure it would work on an animal, he adds skeptically. Amina rolls her eyes. I know the word, but I like calling it a prototype because that means you're a pro. You're official now with your OEV membership and everything. Khalil ducks his head and grins. Thanks, sis. He digs around in a chaotic drawer of papers until he pulls out what looks like a laughably small super soaker water cannon that has been spray painted silver and then dropped in a vat of glitter. Pride fills Amina's eyes, and I'm fairly certain who is responsible for the exterior design. Khalil points the tiny glittered barrel at Amina, which is also at me. I start to squirm and claw. I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen, but I've been the subject of other tests by my villains. I still have a bald patch I have to lick the fur over to cover. I'm not doing that again. Amina holds me up gently. I understand you'd be scared, Wazzy, but you don't have to worry anything. My brother would never do anything to hurt me, and he's also like the best scientist. Like the best. Khalil subconsciously runs his hands up the side of his high top, ensuring it stands tall and proud. Now, I typically never trust anything humans say, primarily because every single one I've ever met lies to everyone all the time. And I'm not just talking about villains, that's a given, but heroes lie too. I remember the first hero I met who rescued me. It had been an exceptionally bad defeat for my villain. The secret lair caught on fire when the doomsday device blew up. Flames burned everywhere. I cowered under the desk, terrified, smoke clogging my lungs and blurring my vision. I'm not ashamed to admit I've never been more terrified in my life. I was barely out of being a kitten, and none of the other cats had prepared me for that possibility. The hero barged in, and I raced forward, so relieved that help had come. I climbed the hero's trouser leg. He screamed and swore, shaking his leg. But I clung to my only chance at salvation like a burr in my overlong, long fur. Finally, the hero promised to adopt me if I let go. Said it in such a sweet, calming voice. Said we would live together, that I'd have the biggest cat tree and all the treats I wanted. I was so happy I released my claws and curled up in his arms, purring in between coughs from smoke inhalation. But of course he lied. He took me straight to the shelter, threw me down, and didn't look back once, no matter how loudly I cried for him to come back, dreams fading like smoke. So no, I never trust anything a human says. But as I stare in Amina's earnest eyes, I don't know why exactly, I stop fighting. Good, Wazzy, Amina murmurs. She nods at Khalil. He suddenly turns around and holds out the gun, now pointed towards all three of us. He backs toward us until we're all lightly touching. It's just easier this way, Khalil says. It's like a science selfie. Smile, Wazzy. Amina presses her cheek into mine as Khalil pulls the trigger. A beam of blindingly bright light shoots out of the barrel and bathes us all. It takes moments for my vision to clear. As it does, I feel a sudden wave of nervousness. My tail twitches furiously. Did it work? I want it to work. I'm pretty sure it worked. But what if it didn't? Does that mean I'm a failure? Confusion fills me. Why am I so anxious? I'm not even at all invested in this gadget functioning properly. I don't even know what function properly means. As I focus on the feelings, I realize something strange. They have a direction, like they're being poured into me from an origin point. My eyes flick towards Khalil. He smiles, relieved, and the feeling of nervousness recedes. I'm overcome by a new wave of excitement and pride. I don't remember the last time I felt either. It's not entirely unpleasant, I suppose. Many. It works. I can feel impressions from Wuzzy. Not as strong as with you, more just like feelings. But I sensed Wuzzy was confused. Then I sensed understanding and maybe a little awe trickling through now. Khalil looks at me. I turn my gaze away and flick my tail. Now that's taking it too far. I'm intrigued, perhaps, but what cat wouldn't be? However, no legitimate cat would ever be in awe of a human being unless said human being was made out of cat treats. Khalil laughs and pets my head a couple times. Okay, I must have been mistaken, not awe. Feelings of amusement flow from Amina. Yeah, it's so funny. Like you said, I get senses of Wuzzy's feelings, but they feel blurry, like they're wrapped in a blanket. With another human, it's so clear and sharp. Sometimes it's overwhelming getting flooded with all their feelings, and sometimes they're exact shots if they're super strong. It's like you're Deanna Troy, not Luaxiana, Khalil quips. Both Amina and I just stare at him unblinkingly. You know, from Star Trek, The Next Generation, because she's half Betazoid. She's an empath. But she can only sense vague and mostly useless things that are totally obvious, like someone shooting at the ship and she's all like, Captain, I sense hostility. A very long moment of silence breaks when Khalil mutters, whatever. Anyway, Amina continues, drawing out the end of the word. It's nice to feel your feelings, was, even a little bit. I'm glad you aren't scared to be here anymore. Again, I flick my tail. I wouldn't say I was ever scared, per se. Amina laughs. Okay, Wuzzers. This is going to take some getting used to.